The MEK. The MEK, also known as the People's Mujahedin of Iran. They're also called the MKO sometimes. This is a group that was formed in Iran during the 60s, right? They were anti-Shah. The Shah is the puppet ruler who was, installed by Britain and the U.S. After Mossadegh tried to nationalize Iran's oil, right? You try to nationalize your country's resources, the West will come and coup you and put someone who will give them your resources. And the MEK formed out of this anti-Shah movement, and, they were part of the Iranian Revolution, the Islamic Revolution in 79. Again, they kind of exaggerate the role that they had in this, but, they're part of it regardless. And, in 79, after the revolution, many things happened with the MEK. They opposed the Constitution, right? There was a constitution put forward, a referendum was held about the Constitution. They were against it. And the referendum passed. The Constitution was adopted. So that's their first major political defeat. And then they were banned from running in the presidential elections, right? And then they ran in the parliamentary elections, and they didn't win a single seat. And then they literally assassinated the president of Iran and the prime minister and the chief of police in the same day. They blew up the prime minister's building, right? This is a page from the New York Times. There's a headline over here. Here, by the way, here's the president, Al-Rajai. So they killed him in June, right? Excuse me, in August of 1981. August of 1981, right? And they killed the prime minister, and they also killed the chief of police. And guess what the MEK is doing today, right? So nowadays the MEK is a friend of the West. And this is very peculiar. This is very interesting because the MEK, while also committing terrorist acts inside of Iran, they were also killing Americans. They were extremely anti-American. They killed 3 American soldiers. They killed 3 American contractors. They even tried to kidnap the U.S. ambassador to Iran. They're not messing around, these people, huh? And during the embassy siege, right, you may recall that the Iranians, they released some hostages early. So I think they released the women, and they released the black hostages, basically anyone who wasn't a white male. They released them to show solidarity with oppressed peoples around the world. And the MEK was against that. They were against any early release of hostages, right? Then what happens? Saddam Hussein starts a war with Iran in 1980, which lasted until 1988. He recruits, he brings in the MEK, he gives them a base, he gives them weapons, he gives them money, and he becomes their primary source of funding. So these Iranians are literally attacking their own country now alongside Saddam Hussein. And of course, Saddam Hussein is being supported by who? The United States and the United Kingdom, right? And Europe at large, right? So the United States had given him chemical weapons, biological weapons at this time, right? When they accused when they accused Iraq of having WMDs in 2003, this was a lie. The entire program was dismantled by then. We knew it was a lie. People like Scott Ritter, who was on the show, I interviewed him. He's a great guy, right? He was the chief weapons inspector for the UN in Iraq. He literally knows better than anyone that there were no weapons there. He tried to warn. They didn't listen. They invaded. It was all a lie. But in the 80s, the United States wanted to attack Iran desperately. They hated Iran because Iran had, deposed the Shah, who was their puppet. They nationalized the oil. They took back their sovereignty, their dignity, their resources, their borders, everything. They cut ties with Israel. The first thing they did with the Israeli embassy, you know what they did? They gave it to the PLO, to the Palestinians. But the MEK goes and takes up arms against Iranians. And they're being backed by the U.S., they're being backed by Saddam, they're being backed by the West. And then what happens as well? They start taking up arms with the Israelis. So you may have recalled in 2010 to 2012, you had 4 very prominent Iranian nuclear scientists who were assassinated in Iran. Everyone knows the Mossad is behind this. This is an open secret. Who helped the MEK? Who helped the Mossad do that? The MEK. Just a few months ago, last year in November 2020, you had an Iranian nuclear scientist who was I think former scientist. Now he's a minister. I forgot what his role was when he was killed, but Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, right? He was a very prominent scientist. They killed him too, the Mossad. And who helped them? The MEK. And now, in recent times, their primary source of funding is Saudi Arabia. All right, Saudi Arabia is using them as a thorn in Iran's side. So you see, this group has a very peculiar history because they have no support in Iran, especially after aligning themselves with Saddam Hussein in the war from 80 to 88, in the Iran-Iraq war, the first real Gulf War, right, in the Persian Gulf. When they did that, when they went and fought alongside Saddam Hussein, they really, completely destroyed any hope of support, because now they were called munafiqeen in Iran. They were called traitors, right? Hypocrites, rather, is the word, but they were considered as traitors, right? So they have no support in Iran. They've killed U.S. soldiers. They've helped, in total, they've killed 17,000 Iranians. So not only are they considered terrorists in Iran, they're banned in Iran, in Iraq now, but the United States also, and the United Kingdom, had them on a list of terrorist groups, right? And then what happens in 2012? Hillary Clinton comes along and she removes them. She removes them from the lists of SDN, specially designated, the list of terror groups, and basically saying like, yeah, we're okay with you now. And it's not just Hillary who removes them, of course. There's a larger plan here. What's happening? It's not just, oh, you're removed from the list of SDNs. You're also now paying U.S. officials. So the MEK was paying John Bolton, the national security advisor under Donald Trump. They're paying Rudy Giuliani. He calls them my MEK friends, right? You don't hear a lot about this. It's extraordinary. So they're paying Rudy Giuliani, Trump's lawyer and former mayor of New York, right? They're paying John Bolton, this neocon. They're paying other U.S. officials now. And now, what do they do in the last days? What did they do this weekend, on the weekend of July 10th? They hold the Free Iran Global Summit. So what is this Free Iran Global Summit? Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look. So here's their website, right? And you can see here, let me just zoom in there for you. The Democratic Alternative on the March to Victory, July 10th to July 12th. Okay? And they're basically hosting an online event where they talk about, the Iranian elections are fraudulent. We have to go implement regime change. That's literally one of their slogans. Iranians want regime change. That's a slogan they use, right? And they hold this online event with a lot of guest speakers. Do you want to know who the guest speakers are? Let's take a look. Are you ready? So let me just scroll up over here. It's Mike Pompeo. Oh, how unsurprising. Mikey is here. Good old Mikey, right? So you remember Donald Trump's Secretary of State. And not just him. Look what happens as well, man. Look what happens as well. The Prime Minister of Slovenia is there, right? We have U.S. senators. Robert Mendes, who's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That's good. That's very useful. Look who else. Ted Cruz. Kevin McCarthy. And you know who else is there? They have the former, they have the British and French defense ministers. They have the former foreign ministers of, I think it was, damn, I can't keep up, man. I can't keep up with how many they are. They have the former foreign ministers of France, Italy, and I think also Poland, right? So you get the picture here. You have numerous currently serving officials in the U.S. government and also in European governments, and former ones, all attending the event of this group, which assassinated Americans, which assassinated the president of Iran, the prime minister of Iran. They're a terrorist group. And you know what they try to do? They try to market this group as a democratic alternative. And of course, they've relocated several times. They're banned in Iran. They have no support in Iran. So they've been kicked out from Iran. They went to Iraq. I think to France and then to Iraq, and from Iraq to Albania, right? So they have no local support in Iran, but it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because they are a tool. They're a pawn of the West. The United States, the Europeans, they're using them as a thorn in Iran's side. They're using them to harass Iran. The Israelis are using them to assassinate Iranian scientists. The Saudis are funding them. Man, let me tell you something. When the Americans, the British, the Saudis, and the Israelis get together to fuck you up, something bad going on. Something evil going on. And that's exactly the same people who've been doing this to Syria, right? So even though Al-Qaeda has attacked the United States helped create Al-Qaeda. The United States has no problem funding Al-Qaeda and its offshoots inside Syria, as long as it serves as foreign policy objectives, right? So as usual, you see Uncle Sam, you see the Americans, you see the British, you see even Iran's regional enemies, all getting together to fund terrorist groups to overthrow and to undermine and to subvert governments they don't like. And then they have the stones. They have the goddamn stones. Mike Pompeo has the stones to come here and say Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism. Really? Who's sponsoring Al-Qaeda? Who's sponsoring the MEK? Who's speaking at their events? Could you imagine if the Iranian foreign minister was speaking at an event of, I don't know, the KKK? Like, this is the equivalent of what's happening here. And people have no clue. They have no clue about this. All you see is, oh, look, they have these free Iran rallies. You see this on many news outlets. I think every single one of them tried to publicize this event because it wasn't just online. It was also, you had multiple cities holding these rallies, right? Like in person, wherever they could at least because of the pandemic. So they don't tell you, oh, this is a group that has like killed 17,000 Iranians. They were fought with Saddam, with the Israelis. They killed the Iranian president. Oh, no. They're a democratic alternative. It's just like what they do in Syria, right? They bring you Al-Qaeda. They bring you people like Al-Jolani, who's an Al-Qaeda commander, and now Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and before that Al-Nusra. And they tell the guy, who's executed boys for criticizing him, who kidnapped nuns in Ma'lula. Yeah, this kind of scum. And they say, oh, look, this guy, he's a reformed terrorist now. He's wearing a suit. He's a democratic alternative to Bashar al-Assad. What the fuck? Dude, the level of brainwashing, of propaganda, the level of scum behavior that you see from the West is unprecedented. This is astronomical. You think anyone in mainstream media is going to break this down for you? You don't hear any of this. So, again, you can see here this headline that I wanted to show you over here. This is from a few years ago. Saudi prince, he attended at one of their events, basically endorsing them, right? He attended at the annual meeting. It's back in 2016, right? I mean, this is incredible, all these speakers that they have here. And as you can see, they're holding rallies. So this is very interesting because people who are protesting in support of Palestine, they're not allowed to hold rallies. When a few weeks ago, 2 months ago now, in May, when the Israelis were bombing Gaza, people protested all over the world. It was great. They protested in support of Palestine, but people tried to protest in France. They wouldn't let them. They banned it. They banned the protest, right? But here, in other cities, they let them go ahead. Berlin, for example, just recently in Germany, they banned any Qudus Day celebrations or Jerusalem Day celebrations. They banned any sort of resistance flags like Hezbollah, Hamas. They designate all these groups as terrorists. But if you're a terrorist who's attacking Iran or Syria, they're totally fine with you, right? Terrorism is fine for the Westerners, for the Europeans, as long as it's against Syria and Iran and Venezuela and Cuba, etc., right? Then they totally love terrorism. They have no problem with groups like Al-Qaeda and MEK. Wow. So this is really incredible. And she's their leader, right? So she is their leader now. And it's really incredible, the level of deceit, of brainwashing that they do in the media. Because, it's one thing for them to do what they're doing, but it's a totally different thing for the West to whitewash them and try to sponsor them and portray them as like some kind of legitimate opposition. This is exactly what they do with Venezuela as well, right? With Guaido. People in Venezuela don't even know who the fuck that is. How are you trying to make this person the president? No one even knows who he is. Not to mention that you have no goddamn business doing that. It's not about how popular he is, right? And same here. They're trying to portray this as an opposition. Dude, most people don't even know what the MEK is. Like people our age who are born young, they don't even know what that is. And those who do, They know their history. They assassinated the president. They've killed, they also bombed the Iran Republican Party headquarters just 2 months before that in June of 1981. They killed 77 officials that day, I think. 77. Incredible, right? And these are just two. These are just two of they're obviously the two most prominent attacks, but two of many. So, you know, it's I don't know. I just find this incredible that this is how they talk about these people in the media. Look at Times of Israel. Look, they say Iran fumes over American European support for opposition group at Berlin rally. No, they're not an opposition group. An opposition group. That's really putting it mildly. That's like saying, you know, that's like saying Al Qaeda in Syria is an opposition group. An opposition group, really? And I suppose the KKK and is also an opposition group. They're fucking terrorists. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. This is all over the media, right? All over the media. Look at this. Oh, the Free Iran World Summit. They talk about it like without any context, without explaining what it is. It's just unbelievable. It really is. So this is another lesson that one must exercise caution when looking at the mainstream media. Everything is just unbelievable. Everything is just unbelievable. How they whitewash them. They don't even care about their own. I mean, let me just be frank with you. If I were American and these people tried to kidnap an American ambassador, I would be outraged. Right, rightfully so. You should be outraged. Never mind that they killed other Americans. So can you imagine how Iranians feel when they see shit like this, right? Iranians have suffered way more at the hands of the MEK. Way more. They're being used against Iranians by foreign governments. So imagine how hurtful, how angering that must be to see that. And I understand it also because of what they're doing in Syria. They bring you these fucking terrorist scum from all over the world, right? They bring you these crazy mercenaries from Chechnya or Afghanistan or Tunisia, you know, even from Turkey, right? From all over the world. They come there, they pay them to kill Syrians and then claim that these people are the Syrian opposition. These people are not even fucking Syrian. You're calling them freedom fighters? You're calling them a revolution? So I understand it to a certain degree, right? How they try to whitewash these terrorists and market them as something else, as an opposition. So this is, again, what we see in Cuba today is part of the same plot. They lie to you about what's going on there. They try to make the so-called opposition seem bigger than it is. They don't tell you about who's behind it. This is always the same goddamn game. The media, the Western corporate media and Western governments are like this, like hand in glove. And then they have the nerve to talk about state media in other countries. Man, this is crazy. So anyway, I'm just going to finish with this by saying I did an episode on this for Press TV. Go and watch it, right? It's the latest one. And of course, as you know, the United States stole the domain. They seized the domains of Press TV and other websites like pirates. So now it's presstv.ir, not presstv.com. So there you go.